What if aging isn't something to resist, but if it's one of many sacred and beautiful initiations of being human? Because the real tragedy isn't us getting older, it's that we might reach old age without ever becoming an elder. Because right now, we live in a culture that worships youth and quietly sidelines age, forgetting the profound role that awaits us if we allow ourselves to grow older and become into the role of the elder. And as my guest today shares, elderhood isn't something that simply happens with time. It's something that we must consciously grow into. Donna Lancaster is a writer, a life transitions coach, an elder, mentor, and group facilitator who's been working with groups, individuals, and couples for 38 years. Plus, she's the author of The Bridge and Wise Words for Women. And Donna shares a deep inner work required to transform our wounds into wisdom, and why a world without elders leaves so many of us feeling lost. Because becoming an elder isn't simply about getting older. It's about learning how to turn the hardest parts of being human into the wisdom that can guide ourselves and others home. And this has to be one of the most profound and meaningful and inspiring conversations I've ever had. I hope that Donna's wisdom that she shares with us today will give you as much as she will continue to give me. Donna, I am so excited for our conversation. Welcome to Death on the Daily.
Thank you, Tanya. Me too. I love talking about death, as you know. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Always love talking about death in these spaces. And as we flow into our conversation, I really want to start in elderhood. This topic really touches me so much. And I think that we live in a society where elderhood has been really pushed to one side and really devalued. And I'd love to start with what an elder is, because I also think there's a lot of us who don't really understand what being an elder truly means. I didn't know it actually until a few years ago. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you what it means.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of people know and associate elderhood and elders with kind of religion, with kind of church leaders and that kind of thing. I'm not religious, so that's not the kind of elderhood I'm talking about. But in terms of what elderhood means or what is an elder to me, it is many things. And I've obviously done a lot of exploration around this. And for me, an elder is somebody that, in essence, has transformed their wounds into wisdom. So there's that real alchemical process that they've been through of taking maybe what life has dealt them and the experiences they've had of living, and then extracting medicine from those experiences. So rather than, what can happen is that we can have really difficult, dark experiences, challenging experiences of loss and grief and heartbreak. And if we don't work with them to transform them, they can become, rather than medicine, they can become poison. So poisoning us, leaking out to others. And so really, for me, an elder is someone, is a medicine person in that way, is that they have transformed their wounds and they've extracted the meaning, the kind of gift. It's what I call, rather crudely, Tanya, a turd-bowed gift, because it's got a turd usually for a boat, something really unpleasant, stinks, it's not a part of our life that we'd go, woohoo! But what an elder does, and not just elders, but seeing as talking about elders, is they've definitely gone through the shit in order to discover the gift of the different elements of their life. So that's one part about being an elder. I mean, there's many. The other thing I would say is an elder is really able to hold multiple truths and live with the both andness of life. It's like an elder can hold deep sorrow and grief in one hand and great joy and gratitude in the other, and treats them both with equal respect and reverence. That's an elder right there. And I mean, there's many other things, depends how long you want me to waffle for, but there's many other parts just to touch on around being a guide, being a loving, safe pair of hands, and being something for so many people when they didn't have wise adults in their life. An elder is someone, you don't have to be related to an elder, that they can be invited into your life to guide and support you at your own kind of thresholds and times of difficulty and transition. So an elder's role is also about service. It's about taking that, extracting that medicine, and then reaching out a hand to the following generations and saying, how can I help you? How can I support you? How can I champion you? That's an elder.
Wow. I love as well the fact that an elder's role isn't just about immediate family and that importance of elders and community, because that's what I feel is really, really, really missing. I think in general, for me, I wish I had have had more reverence for the elders in my family before I realized it in my mid-30s. And by then, my 3 grandparents who were remaining all had dementia and were quite advanced within it. But we learn these lessons as we go through life. And if only I could have had this lived experience in my younger body. But actually, I think that there's something really powerful as well of where we used to live in community and that guidance of elders through that. I could imagine that as the community of elders and that body of lived experience, that wisdom, as you shared, turning what would be otherwise poison within us into that wisdom. And before we get into what we lose as a society, because I think there's a very big conversation there, but actually I'd love to root us into your story and what you're becoming into elderhood has been like. You talk about, and you've written about yourself as the elder in training. So what's the journey been like for you?
Rich. Rich and varied and dark and light and both and, So, but I think I totally agree with you, by the way, Tanya, is that there's so much lost, and we can touch on that some more maybe, but and when you look back, like in your life with your grandparents, and maybe some missed opportunities, but we don't know until we know, but for me, because I didn't have, like many people, I didn't have emotionally mature, healthy role models, not even as parents, let alone grandparents. So I had to be creative about finding my own elders. And I didn't realize necessarily that I was doing it at the time. But now I look back and I realize, like Nelson Mandela was my spiritual grandfather. Maya Angelou was my spiritual grandmother. So I kind of chose these people without their permission. And I naturally gravitated towards elders. And elders don't have to be sitting in front of you. They can literally be these great, like the Bell Hooks and the Toni Morrisons, and all of these people were elders to me and continue to be, even though they're no longer with us. So I just wanted to add that bit around it. But for me, in terms of the training piece, I started describing myself as an elder in training. I think I was about 55. I'm 50, almost 59 now. And I really saw that I started to do a lot of reading and educating myself, and recognizing that there was a big grieving process. There was another transition, which was letting go of basically aging. And I always say that aging is a spiritual practice. It's also a death practice. And I started to realize that there was a grieving process that needed to take place around about early 50s, that was about letting go of the identity of being a young kind of, or relatively young, kind of looking a certain way. And there was a necessary grieving of kind of like, oh, that part of me, that version of me is dying, and it's evidence that it's dying because I can see my body, my face, everything is new, not old, new.
Wow.
And so then that's when I started to say, actually, I'm going to I'm initiating myself to become an elder. And it is a becoming, like all great kind of roles in life are a process. And that's what I've been doing for the last sort of 4.5 years, is taking every life experience that I have and looking at it through that lens of extracting the wisdom, extracting the medicine, so that I can add it to my kind of, pot of wisdom and wonder that I can offer So people can, have a like pick and mix experience of all of that as and when they need it.
Wow, I love that. And I love that perspective as well of what you were seeing. It's new. It's
Yes.
that new phase. And with that, the death that comes with it. Because I
Yeah.
definitely I know even as I turned 40 last week as we're recording this, and I definitely had those moments of, wow, I'm leaving my 30s, and then seeing, and actually my husband on the day was like, oh, you got a few more gray hairs, and having those moments. But it is really powerful when we can go so consciously into them. And actually, I think that, I mean, we live in a, this is where we'll pivot into the cultural conversation, but we live in a society and a culture where the dominant Western narrative is very much about anti-aging and trying to avoid it all at all costs. And that must do us such harm. So yeah, what happens if we resist us aging and us moving forwards in life into that new? What does that create within us?
Well, it creates a disharmony and a misalignment with your soul's purpose. And I think so many people, because we do, we live in a world, as you say, in a culture, especially in the West, and we're obsessed with youth.
Yeah.
And that all the associations we have around vitality, etc., especially as women. And I think what gets lost, one of the many things that get lost, apart from the medicine and the wisdom, etc., and the soul, the alignment with your soul's growth and expansion, what the other thing that gets lost is that you instead of becoming an elder, you just become elderly. And you may look, sometimes people, I did some work a while ago in LA, and I said to the group, I'm an elder in training. And then afterwards people would say, oh, you're not elderly. And they had no concept of what I was talking about. And, you can be 65 with a 25-year-old's face nowadays if you want to. But I think you're missing the point. And I've got no judgment about people do what they want to do to feel their best selves. But if you are only focusing on the external and being approved of and validated and still seen as sexy or youthful, you really are missing the medicine. And then what happens is it kind of eventually becomes poison, because you will age. And you will, and just like we're death averse, we're age averse. And so if you can, and I've seen it, I've worked with enough people, you can keep lifting those tits and everything else with it. But ultimately, age, like death, will take you. And so if you don't extract the wisdom and you don't see aging as a spiritual practice, which it is, you really just become a form of poison in the world, because it means that the next generations are looking at these women and going, oh, I have to look like that, and I have to stay like that, and I don't focus on any kind of inner beauty or cultivation of inner beauty. I'm only interested in everything being taught and upwards. And I always say, Tanya, that the beautiful thing about aging is that everything in the body starts to go south, and it's like your body is preparing to go home. It's starting to travel down. My tits are traveling south, and they're like, they know where they want to go. They want to go back to the land,
Oh, that's brought tears to my eyes. That's such a beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah.
It's that, and that again, it's because if you look out into nature and how obviously death has been pushed outside of our communities and outside of our homes into very clinical spaces on the whole, not everyone. Thankfully, we're starting to move in the other direction now. But actually, there is such a lack of understanding of that. Everything goes south and then eventually turns into compost. And that's such a beautiful, gentle process.
Yes.
That actually, if we can be present with it. And I love that, when just your words, inner beauty. And actually it's actually, how can we as a society just really learn to appreciate and value more the inner beauty that we hold from that wisdom that we can catalyze? That's so powerful.
Isn't it? And it is, there's such riches that are missed if you're only interested in the vessel. You know, if you're only interested in the external and the validation of the external. And, you know, I always get sad, Tanya, when I see, you know, some people, you know, in the public eye or whatever, and they're still talking about, oh, I'm this and I'm my old baggy, saggy, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, don't do that. Was that what that does to young people, as it instills the fear in them of this terrible thing, especially women, that you're going to have to go through. And what we, again, an elder piece is what we want to do is show them it is liberation. You know, for heterosexual women, for example, to lose the need for the male gaze, it's like, woohoo! It's like, you know, and you know, people talk about becoming invisible, but you become more visible to yourself.
Yes.
And it's the same, you know, that energy, that life force that pumps through you when you really, it's not to say we don't grieve. We grieve the process. That's aging is a spiritual practice. We grieve, it's letting go, it's surrender, letting go, surrender, and embracing the new, not the old, the new.
Wow.
And it is, like I say, like when men stopped looking at me, I was like, thank fuck for that. You know, it was just liberation. I've been looked at all my life, this little cute little brown girl, you know. It was like, I don't need that anymore. And I've entered a new phase of my life, and I've got a new face and a new southernly pointing pair of tits to prove it, you know.
I love that. I wish, I mean, this, and obviously your work is a big part of hopefully turning this one day, and however long it takes in our society and culture, but into the dominant narrative, because it's so empowering. But as you shared, unfortunately, our elders are sidelined and do become so invisible. I am currently trustee for AGK Waltham Forest, one of the small little community charity versions of the bigger national Age UK, and my work with them, and actually my work in advertising with the main Age UK brand, that was the first time that I think that might have been the first time I really started thinking about older people in society in general, let alone elders, and just that invisibility. And what do we lose as a society and as in our world, and how our world, it's a very big question, but how our world is and where our world is going wrong? What are we losing when we're not valuing our elders within society?
I believe that one of the many significant things we lose is around guidance and support of wise people that have lived a life, that have walked before us. And I think that so many people, they don't have emotionally mature parents or grandparents in their lives, because so many people don't do their healing work. So they're kind of like emotionally arrested. That's why so many people look like they're 50 or 60 or 70, but they're actually 5 inside, because they're kind of stuck at the stage of life when they were first traumatized or wounded, and then they look like a grown-up, but they're not, basically. And so I think but because elders, the very nature of elderhood is you have to be initiated through healing. And so when you don't have elders around you that have done the healing work, people just left, you know, lost, confused. I think there's a lack of kind of respect and reverence about the next stage after adulthood and in between adulthood and death. And I think elderhood is you know, it's lost to so many people because they don't want to think about what comes after as well, the death. So it's like, let's just pretend that we just grow up as adults, but never do actually grow up for many people. And then let's just pretend that's where the story ends, you know? And it's just like, no. So I think people avoid elderhood and turn away from it because it means there's something on the other side. And you know, elders are the gatekeepers to the ancestors. So it's really that, again, is a piece that so many people are terrified of.
Wow. I've got in my head just a bunch of Peter Pans.
Yes, exactly. It's the eternal child syndrome,
Yeah.
you know, and we have so many. And, you know, my female equivalent of Peter Pan is Disney Diva. You know, it's like, you know, that was just what I called it. It's like that's the kind of, I just want to stay young forever, as long as my, you know, heaven forbid I get jowls, heaven forbid that my tits droop. It's just all about the vessel, no learning, no growth, no wisdom. We see it everywhere, you know, and so many people, I think, are just desperate for guidance and a sense of hope, Tanya, that there is kind of something coming that is worth hanging around for, you know. That is really lost, is like, elders are juicy, you know, when they've really done, when you meet an elder, you feel it, because they're so full of life force, and they've got, it doesn't matter if their body is starting to slow down, because you see it in the eyes, you feel it in the energy. They've got a twinkle, you know, a bit cheeky, and that life force really inspires younger people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s to kind of look and go, actually, that's something to aspire to. I don't need to focus on only biceps and boobs. I can actually aspire to that cultivation of inner beauty, wisdom, and service, you know. So much is lost. And I think people are lost because of what we've lost.
Yes. Oh, and what I've got floating around in my mind is that we resist aging because we think that all will be lost. But as you shared, there is so much that we have, that newness, that cultivation. And I think it's really beautiful, because actually I was always taught, you grow old, you retire. It's almost like that. And then there's no narrative about what happens after that point. And so there is definitely, it's almost like you're on this treadmill, and you come to towards the end, and the resistance. But actually what I love in your work, and in that reconnection of us all to elderhood, into that, it's a role. And I love that. What a purpose to say, actually, no, it's not just I'll work and then I'll retire at this age and then that's it, and I disappear into a little cottage somewhere. It's actually, no, there's a role that I can step into, and that learning and growth continues until the day I die.
Yes.
I'm so inspired. I feel like this is a perfect conversation as I turn 40 to be like, look at all the life that is left in all of these different chapters and all the different portals that we step through.
Totally. You know, now I've got friends in their 70s and 60s and 70s and even in their 80s, and just seeing these different thresholds and the different levels of wisdom that they're sharing with me, because they're further along, you know, on the kind of human journey at least, and just really being fascinated by, you know, some of my friends, and they're so naughty, and so, you know, and I went out with one yesterday for a walk, and she's just so, you know, she's in her 70s and she's so full of life. And that, you know, that's very different from being an elder to being elderly. And most people have just become elderly. They don't become elders, you know.
Yes.
And, so many riches, and just embracing each stage, like you say, of life, and seeing it as a newness rather than an oldness. Because I've never been 58 before. I've never been at this stage of my life before. I've never had a face like this before. It's all new to me.
Wow. And that is then the good childlike side, which is that childlike curiosity.
Yes.
To just be able to say, who am I in this chapter? And I think as well, death has really taught me to not take any chapter of my life for granted, to never wish my life away. And that was something that I wrote about on my 40th, about the fact that actually losing my daughter, becoming a bereaved mother, made me think actually death can come knocking at any time in life. So am I ever going, and the fact that my daughter and so many don't get the privilege of being able to get older, to age. And I had a real realization that actually I'm never going to take aging for granted, because of those who I love and many other people outside of that who never get that opportunity. Hello, beautiful friend. If you're watching this, then I'm guessing that it might be because you're grieving. And you might be like many of the grievers who I support through my grief coaching, as well as people who I speak to on the daily, who say to me, T, I don't have time to grieve. I can't find the space in any month to be able to be with my grief. And that's why I've created Grief Cocoon, a brand new monthly live event that happens online, so you can tune in from your own grief cocoon at home. And cocooning is really important in our grief. When we are present with our grief, when we allow space for us to tend to our grief through ritual, through nervous system support and care, through reflection like journaling, all of which we're going to be doing in the grief cocoon. It enables us, like that little caterpillar, to go into our cocoon and to support our transformation and our emergence on the other side as that butterfly who's integrated grief as a part of our story. If you want to join us for the next Grief Cocoon event, then head to the show notes and all of the details are there. It feels like a beautiful space to pivot into a conversation around death as well. Obviously, death has been woven into everything that you've been sharing today. And I love how you write that death is such a fascinating, nuanced doorway of awakening. So what really first showed you that death could be our portal rather than our ending?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I experienced death as a portal was when I turned 30 years old, and I was living the wrong life. You know, my whole life was a big fat patriarchal lie, you know, and I was just pretending to be okay and pretending that I didn't need to go inside and just pretending basically. And I had this, you know, moment in my life, which I've written about and I've spoken about extensively, where it felt like the universe staged an intervention, and the universe saw that I was a warrior woman, and I'd had to be to survive my own traumatic childhood. And so the warrior could have gone on for another 10, 15, 20 years. And it was like, I always say, the universe looked kindly on me and said, bless her, like, let's take her down, you know.
Wow.
Let's rip off the Band-Aid and let's like take her down now. And so I did literally go down to my knees and in a toilet at work, and that was when I was on that floor, and I literally thought I was dying, which was actually kind of accurate, because I was spiritually dying. The death of Donna the warrior was that life of Donna the warrior was over. That version of myself died on that toilet floor. And I then had this moment of realizing, and this kind of, I even saw an opening of something. It was like a psychedelic experience, and I hadn't taken psychedelics, and it was just like this opening, and I realized that I was being called to a new life, a different life, and everything that I had believed myself to be up until that point was dying. And that was both terrifying and necessary and exhausting and hopeful.
Wow. That and energy, the and that it requires our presence to be there with, because I love that your work centers that spiritual death alongside, as you guide people into better relationship with death, it's spiritual death alongside our own physical death and obviously the death of our loved ones.
Yes.
And what happens to us as humans when we can look at death differently, and when we can see all of these ways that we die before we actually physically die? How does that change how we live our life?
I mean, I think that is the key piece, Tanya, is that when people fear death, they think about the end of their life. They think about this terrible thing is looming, and that's why the aging is so scary, because as soon as I look like I'm getting older, it means that it's closer, which you know only better than anyone that that's not necessarily how it works. What my teaching involves is helping people understand that when they start to think about death of their parents, say, or death of their loved ones, or death of themselves, they've already died 1,000 times.
Wow.
They've already been through many, many experiences of dying into life, shedding, releasing themselves from a version of themselves, like me at that 30-year point, you know, and I've died many times since, you know. And so when people understand that you go through many initiations, many death processes, it kind of, that's one way that death itself, as in losing, this physical earth suit, is when they get to that point that it's less scary, because you think, oh, I know how to do death, because
Wow.
I've died into life 1,000 times. I've died and been reborn. And I mean, that's the other thing I would say, Tanya, is like, we know how to die just as we know how to be born. And they're the two most significant journeys in a human life form, is coming into the world and transitioning out of the world. And we know how to do it. The body knows how to do it. It's only the ego that goes, no. So yeah, I think there's such rich medicine in understanding when you come to the end of your physical form and you are about to transition, that first of all, for me, it doesn't end, but also that you've already been dying your whole life.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Dying your whole life. I love that. It's that we aren't just apprentices of life, we are apprentices of life and death throughout our life. And
Yeah.
I love that as well, that take on the innate wisdom. I had Professor David Casseret, who he is the director of Duke University's palliative medicine division, and he was talking about, he's written a book about the innate wisdom, and I don't feel like he didn't quite understand it because he's obviously a scientist, but I read his book as a love letter to our body. It was just so beautiful in how he wrote about the body's processes at the end of life, as anyone would write about how awe-inspiring birth is. And I just love that perspective, that actually it's us going through all of these deaths to get us comfortable with death, but also that trust. What I could really hear from what you shared is actually we can also trust in our body. And I feel like as I've gotten older, my trust in my body is growing more and more, and I'm able to release the control of my mind.
Yes.
So as well, I feel like in my journey, it's going to be that surrender, that true surrender into your body, that actually when you go through these physical thresholds,
Yeah.
you have to do, and where you can be really conscious to that.
Yes. Totally. And I think, there's something about, which is why I really encourage people to kind of prepare for death and dying, is because, I can't remember who said it, but the belief is that this isn't true of everybody, by the way, but I'm talking about people that are privileged with old age, with getting, aging through dying through age and age-related illness, is that you will, when you come to that point, you will die how you have lived. And so if you have lived resisting life, you will die in resistance, and I saw that with my own mum, bless her. My mum was terrified of living, and ultimately at the end she was terrified of dying, even though she'd never really lived. So she died as she lived. And I think that's just quite profound to recognize that we can, in getting closer to death in terms of our awareness and befriending death, we can then live in a way that makes sure that we will die how we lived.
Wow, that's so profound. And thinking about my grandparents, I can map out exactly my nana, my amama, my Sri Lankan grandmother. I can really connect to them. They were the true elders. My mama was always incredibly spiritual, and I wish now there's so much stuff I do now that I think she would be so happy to see me doing it. But I definitely could have apprenticed with her when I was younger and actually learned from her instead of from other people. And both her and my nan, they actually died 6 days apart last year, which was after a decade each with dementia, which was really quite beautiful in itself, of the timing that they chose to do. But them versus my granddad, who was always incredibly fearful. There was a lot of trauma that he went through as a young child, and a lot of his life there was a lot of disconnection, a lot of fear, and all of that stuff. So that fear then did go right up until the end. And now I'm thinking about each of their journeys, and that it feels like it's such for me, it brings a lot of inspiration of just continuing this journey, continuing this work, continuing that it's a practice of presence, isn't it, with whatever life and death brings.
Totally. And I love, by the way, I think, you may not have felt like you took advantage of the kind of your grandmother as an elder and initiating you in terms of what your work is now, but don't be fooled that she isn't standing right behind you right now, and you know, you are your grandmother's daughter, granddaughter, and so it's really that recognition that, you know, I always think with ancestors that they are whispering their guidance long after they've left their body, you know. So you're being initiated with her right now, just not in the human form perhaps that you thought you might.
Oh, Donna, thank you so much for sharing. That's brought tears to my eyes as well. And I think that is just given me so much inspiration. But I think that can give others inspiration as well if they feel that they didn't get that benefit in the lifetimes of their elders, to know that that relationship, it continues beyond. Oh, it's so beautiful.
It's beautiful, isn't it? And, you know, I had one of my witchy friends came to one of my workshops, which is about preparing for death, recently, and she was sitting at the back. And I know that on my father's African side, that I have a great grandmother that was a shaman, African shaman, and I have a sense. I've dreamt about what she's looks like, and I have a sense of her, and I definitely feel like she guides me in my work. And my friend, who I hadn't sort of spoken to about this, described this woman standing behind me when I was at the front of the room. I know. And she said, oh, I saw this woman and she looked like this and she had this big headdress on, and it was my grandmother, my great grandmother, sorry, on my father's side. It was the African shaman. There she was guiding me, and I wasn't even aware.
Oh, Donna, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And it just shows the interconnections that we can all have, and where others can also shine that mirror up of our ancestors standing right alongside.
Amazing, huh?
Absolutely incredible. My heart is full. Wow. And again, I think that is so beautiful, because it shows that for any of us as well, when I get to elderhood, but for any of us as elders, if we're lucky and we have the privilege of reaching elderhood and obviously of initiating into that role, I think it's really beautiful as well to remember that actually there is that imprint, there's those footsteps on the sand that we leave for those, and that actually, again, our imprint on those who we love, on communities, it continues beyond us. So it's very big and powerful work, but on such a gentle, beautiful, not gentle always, obviously going through thresholds and all of that, but a step by step through life, breath by breath pathway.
Yes.
A lifetime.
Totally. And it's really, you know, ancestral work is a big part of the initiation into elderhood. And to recognize that you really are standing on the shoulders of thousands and thousands of people that came before you and made huge sacrifices, many of which you may never know about, you know. And on my father's side, I know that there was slavery, you know, and so I don't take it for granted that I stand up out of my bed every day and my feet are not shackled, you know. And that's a huge ancestral honoring piece. Is like, okay, so because of what my ancestors lived through and the sacrifices they had to make and the lives that they lost, I get to stand here with unshackled feet. So how am I going to walk through my life as an elder in training, as a spiritual being having a human experience? How am I going to walk through my life in a way that honors my ancestors and all the sacrifices they made, so that I can be free with unshackled feet?
Wow. Not taking everything that they have given us for granted. Don't take this life and the paths that led us to this life and the people who walk those paths for granted, which so many of us do. We live in a life where we are very comfortable, aren't we? And we can be too comfortable with that and not realize actually all that's got us here.
Yeah, exactly. And really inviting, you know, I always say to people on my elder training, you know, to invite your ancestors into your life every day. You know, my mum, my grandmother, my grandfather, they come with me and they get to play with their like great grandchildren through me. Like, these hands are their hands. And so when I'm picking up my grandson, my great grandparents and great-great-grandparents are playing with their grandson through me, you know.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful gift to invite your ancestors into your life.
That's such a beautiful gift. It's interesting, actually, because when we went through the termination for medical reasons and then stillbirth of our daughter, I felt really strongly my great-grandmothers were there alongside. I just had this real strong feeling of almost like, it wasn't just them, it was like a chain of mothers. And also with that realization as well, I actually got a lot of comfort. I remember being in the hospital during the induction, and I got a lot of comfort from almost realizing I wasn't the first person for sure in my family who would have walked through that portal. And I got lots of courage to say, actually, well, I know, again, I'm using your words, I'm standing on the shoulder of these incredible women before me, and actually I'm not the first. Unfortunately, I probably won't be the last. And actually it made me see, actually, I can see through this. I will get through to the other side.
Yeah, beautiful. And to know that you know, I'm very visual, Tanya, and I see your grandmothers like really the midwives of both life and death in that moment, you know, and it's just makes me very tearful, actually, but it's just beautiful to know that they were there. And like you said, that you're not the first and you sadly won't be the last, but that they were there to support you in such a pivotal moment in your life, you know, and just trusting that, you know, because we can get all kind of intellectual and heady about, oh, I'm making it up. Trust in that, you know, that intuitive feminine wisdom is so strong. And do you honestly believe that your grandmothers would let you go through that alone? No chance.
Oh, I love that, Donna. I'm just breathing all of that in. I feel like I've got pictures of my grandmothers and my great grandmothers actually around my house, and I'm going to pull them all together into a little altar tonight and just honor them after our conversation.
Nice.
So, Donna, I could honestly talk to you all day. I just think the work that you do is absolutely incredible. But unfortunately, much like everything in life, this conversation is impermanent and I need to bring it to a close, very sadly. But before we close out, I just want to see if you've got any final words for anyone who's listening, whether it's an aspiring elder or anyone who is just journeying through this life. And then also, I would love for you to share as well where people can find you and anything you wish to as well about your incredible work with elders in the portals of death and everything else that you do.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation as well, very much, Tanya, and I agree. It feels like I always see it as a dance, and it feels like we're really in flow, and our dance steps are just perfect. So it's always tempting to want to continue to dance, but like you say so wisely, that like everything, it comes to an end. And I mean, what I would say is, whether it's about elderhood or even kind of thresholds in life, is that don't fall for the patriarchal trick of perfection. So, you know, perfection is a patriarchal trick, especially for women, this belief that whatever you do, you need to do it perfectly or to look perfect or whatever it might be. It just keeps us frozen from doing anything, and also from feeling not good enough in everything that we do or present. So I would really encourage people to begin imperfectly in whatever threshold, whatever phase of life they are facing, whether that's healing, awakening, elderhood, whatever it might be. Begin clumsily, begin imperfectly. It doesn't have to be holy, and it definitely doesn't want to be perfect. So just begin.
Wow. Just begin. That's spoken to me. I've definitely got that perfectionism conditioned into me thanks to our patriarchal system. You've just spoken straight to my soul. Wow. And I love that. Just do it clumsily, like the little chick, the baby birds that falls out of the nest and goes flat on the floor and just picks themselves up again. It's okay.
Yes. Exactly. And I always talk about Bambi-Legged Courage, you know, because so often people think about courage as something where we're like warriors, and it's like, let's do this, you know, all that kind of nonsense. And again, patriarchal. Whereas what I'm talking about is the deep and feminine wisdom of the kind of feel the fear and do it anyway style. So you have your, Bambi legs. You're like, I do things and people go, oh, weren't you afraid? Of course, and my legs are shaking. My voice is breaking sometimes. And I'm like Bambi. And I still wobble my way forward into whatever new experience it is, and that's really what I encourage people is Bambi-legged courage. It's when we're open and tender and vulnerable, that's the most beautiful gift that you can give to life itself, is to do something from a place of Bambi-legged courage. Is like, I'm afraid, of course I am, and here I go, wobbly steps at a time,
Yes. Wow. I think there's also a real reframing as well on Bambi in general. And just if you think about what's courage, again, if you ask your average person in our patriarchal world, it would be the knight or whatever. But
Yes.
actually, Bambi coming out after being hidden away and mourning and coming out into the snow, little wobbly legs, that is, I love that Bambi-legged courage.
Yeah, and it's such again, coming into terms of the topic of your podcast and your focus of your work, Tanya, is that thing of being, it's like being born again, in terms of Bambi, just kind of getting up on your little unstable legs, and I think that is that dying into life piece again. It's like we do it over and over again imperfectly. And I wouldn't want to know anyone that hasn't, doesn't go through life with their stumbles and bumbles and clumsy, I mean, this is why I always say that I'm like, I have stabilizers on my elder bike. That's why I'm an elder in training, because I still, I have, my daughter sometimes says to me, oh, Mom, I have a very limited filter in what comes out of my mouth. And sometimes that's profound wisdom. And other times it's just pure rudeness. But I just think, it's all good to, sometimes I say clumsy things, and but I know that my heart is open and warm and tender, and that's, hard one to live in a difficult, often cold and challenging world and stay warm and tender and open. That's what it's all about, Tanya. That's what it's all about.
Wow. And that is true courage, in the sense of courage meaning the word heart, and exactly what we need in the world. We don't need more strong in the patriarchal sense of the word. We need that courage. My daughter's name actually is Ngako Raiona, and in Maori it means, my husband's language, it means lioness heart. And so for me, it's always that of she and our experience together, actually through pregnancy as well, because there was a lot of me being like, whoa, this is me having to let go of control in ways I've never been able to do before. She's taught me so much about what the truth of courage is. And to your point around that Bambi-legged courage, actually, we can be at our most courageous when we feel at our least strong, when we're literally, I'm on my hands. And like you shared as well, that moment where you're on your hands and knees in the loo at work, it's those moments, those are the ones that really do make all of the difference, and that shows the heart that we have.
Totally. And I always say that, when you're down in the dirt of humility street, when you're nose down in the dirt of humility street, stay long enough to look around and don't, we're so quick to get back up on our legs and standing again. And it's like, just stay. And I'm not talking about wallowing, but stay long enough to take the gifts offered to you in the dirt. Quite often we're always looking up for gifts, like up to the heavens, to spirit, to light. And I believe that really so many of the gifts are to be found in the dirt of life. Wow. That's where the real riches are, and you and I both know what that looks like, feels like, to find those gifts.
Wow, I love that. And you just connected me into where are all the precious metals, the gems, the diamonds. They're not up in the sky, are they?
No, exactly.
Exactly. And how do you get there? It's not like they're abundant in the dirt. You just scoop up a bit of, you've got to go and be in the dirt to
Yes.
find them and be really present to be able to spot them and see them.
Yes. Beautiful.
Wow. So before I chat to you for another hour, Donna, I'd love for you to share anything that you wish to around your work, where people can connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a website, which is donnalancaster.com. I also write on Substack, which is called A Pilgrimage for the Soul. I write little snippets on Instagram because that's one of the way I serve in the world as an elder, is hopefully inspiring, sometimes challenging offerings. And that is, you can find me on Instagram at Donna Lancs. That's Donna and then Lancs. And then I've got 2 books, Wise Words for Women and The Bridge. So there's options. You've got options.
Wonderful. I just immersed in your website and all of your offerings and everything that you do. You're definitely going to be seeing my face very soon.
Yay! Yay!
For
sure.
Really, really beautiful, really powerful. All of the work that you do through all of those portals, thresholds, and then obviously as you help to initiate and in that becoming into elderhood as well for anyone who's interested in that side.
Absolutely. And the Preparing for Death workshop as well. But, you know, also for people to know that that there's obviously offerings that cost money, and there are also offerings that don't. And it's just that there's both sides of I have to earn money, like everyone, pay my bills, and I wish I could do everything for free, but that's not reality for me. However, I do feel very passionately about offering things to people that could never access the paid stuff. So that's also on my website, is my free offerings.
Yeah, beautiful. That generous spirit definitely shines through. So Donna, for everything that you've shared today, I'm leaving with so much. We're filming on Friday the 13th.
Yes.
I'm about to go into the weekend. I've got so much inspiration now. I've got all these rituals bubbling around in my brain. So literally my heart to yours, Donna. I'm so grateful to you for sharing this space with me and for leaving me with so much that I'm going to be imprinted with and really integrating for a very long time ahead.
Thank you, Tanya. That's just so lovely to hear. And it's been such a joy. And this is all, like I said, it's a dance, and it's also a feast for both of our souls. So I'm going to be feasting on this for some time. So thank you for the food that you've offered my soul. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Death on the Daily. If you like this episode, it would mean a lot if you could hit subscribe. Plus, head to the show notes to find out about my work as a grief coach, and there's a grief journaling freebie there for you. Until we meet here next time, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something